Anna Martinez, a 29-year-old former Army medic and current pharmacy technician, thought her biggest worry was adjusting to civilian life after 3 tours in Afghanistan. Then Roger Whitfield knocked on her door at 7:23 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, demanding she remove her unauthorized pet within 48 hours. What happened next will make you question everything you know about your own neighborhood. Before you hear this story, ask yourself, do you really know your HOA rules? This happened just 18 months ago in Willowbrook Gardens, a quiet suburban community in Colorado Springs. The family involved, Anna and her 4-year-old golden retriever Buddy. They're still living there, but the community will never be the same. Anna had saved for 6 years to buy her modest 3-bedroom home at 1247 Maple Lane, working 12-hour shifts at the VA hospital pharmacy while battling PTSD from her military service. Every dollar counted toward her dream of stability. The house represented more than home ownership. It was her sanctuary, the first place she'd felt truly safe since returning from Kandahar in 2019. Her therapy dog Buddy, a gentle golden retriever trained specifically for PTSD support, had been her constant companion through panic attacks, nightmares, and the slow journey toward healing. She had done everything by the book. Before even viewing properties in Willowbrook Gardens, Anna researched the HOA's pet policies thoroughly. Her paralegal training from community college served her well as she combed through every bylaw, every restriction, every form required. She submitted Buddy's registration paperwork 3 months before closing, including Dr. Patricia Williams' detailed letter explaining his role as a psychiatric service animal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The HOA's property management company, Prestige Community Services, had approved the registration in writing. Anna kept that approval letter in a fire-safe box alongside her deed and insurance papers. For 8 months, life in Willowbrook Gardens felt like the peaceful existence Anna had dreamed of during those sleepless nights overseas. Buddy accompanied her on evening walks through the manicured streets, his calm presence helping her navigate the hypervigilance that made crowded spaces feel like minefields. Neighbors waved from their driveways, and Anna slowly began to believe she might actually belong somewhere again. Mrs. Helen Lee, the 73-year-old widow next door, often stopped to chat about her prize, winning roses, while Buddy sat patiently, his therapy dog vest clearly identifying his working status. But Roger Whitfield had been watching. Roger, a 58-year-old retired insurance adjuster who had served as HOA president for 4 years, prided himself on maintaining Willowbrook Gardens' property values through strict rule enforcement. After his wife left him the previous year, claiming he was more interested in controlling the neighborhood than their marriage, Roger had thrown himself even deeper into HOA business. The community's perfectly maintained appearance was his greatest achievement, and he viewed any deviation from the rules as a personal attack on his authority. What Anna didn't know was that Roger had been building a case against her since the day she moved in. He photographed Buddy in the yard, timed their walks, and made notes about every instance he could construe as a violation. In Roger's mind, the neighborhood's strict no pets policy should have no exceptions, regardless of federal law. The fact that some government bureaucrat thought Anna deserved special treatment only reinforced his belief that society was falling apart, one accommodation at a time. The evening Roger appeared at Anna's door, she was preparing for another grueling night shift at the pharmacy. Buddy sensed her pre-work anxiety and had positioned himself at her feet, his warm weight grounding her racing thoughts. When the aggressive knock came, Buddy immediately moved between Anna and the door, his training kicking in as her heart rate spiked. Roger stood on her porch holding a manila folder thick with documents, his thin lips pressed into the tight smile that had become his signature expression during confrontations. He wore his HOA President polo shirt despite the cool October evening, as if the title embroidered on his chest gave him the authority to disrupt her evening routine. Behind him, Anna noticed his pristine white sedan parked precisely in his driveway, and a sleek gray cat lounging on his porch railing, watching the interaction with yellow eyes. The violation notice Roger handed her was professionally printed on official HOA letterhead, complete with case numbers and legal language designed to intimidate. According to the document, Anna was in flagrant violation of Section 4.2 of the Community Covenants, which prohibited pets over 25 pounds. Buddy, at 68 pounds of gentle golden fur, clearly exceeded this limit. The notice demanded his immediate removal within 48 hours, threatening daily fines of $100 until compliance was achieved. As Anna read the document, her hands began to tremble. Not from fear, but from the familiar surge of anger that accompanied her PTSD episodes. Buddy pressed closer to her legs, his training allowing him to detect the subtle changes in her breathing and posture that preceded a panic attack. This story will change how you look at every HOA letter in your mailbox. Anna's first instinct was to comply. Her military training had taught her to respect authority structures, even when she disagreed with orders. She spent that night researching apartments that would accept large dogs, calculating the financial impact of breaking her mortgage, and wondering how she would explain to Dr. Williams that her carefully constructed support system was crumbling because of a neighborhood rule. But something stopped her from making those calls. Maybe it was Buddy's steady presence beside her bed, or the memory of Mrs. Lee mentioning how that beautiful gray cat had been digging in her roses lately. As Anna lay awake at 3 a.m., a nagging question kept surfacing. If Roger was so committed to the no pets policy, why did she see a cat on his porch every morning? The next day, Anna did what her paralegal training had taught her. She investigated. Armed with her camera and a notebook, she began documenting what she had been too polite to notice during her first months in the neighborhood. Roger's cat, a long-haired gray Persian named Princess according to the rhinestone collar she wore, roamed the community freely every day. Unlike Buddy, who was always leashed and under Anna's direct control, Princess wandered through neighbors' yards, left paw prints on freshly washed cars, and had claimed several gardens as her personal litter box. But what Margaret Thompson, the 67-year-old grandmother who lived 3 houses down, shared during an impromptu conversation, changed everything. Margaret had been dealing with Princess's destructive behavior for over a year. The cat had killed 3 generations of baby birds in Margaret's carefully maintained bird sanctuary, destroyed her herb garden by using it as a scratching post, and left dead mice on her porch as unwanted gifts. When Margaret approached Roger about controlling his pet, he dismissed her concerns with a condescending lecture about cats being natural outdoor animals who couldn't be contained like dogs. Anna's investigation revealed that Princess wasn't just uncontrolled, she was completely unregistered with the HOA. There was no record of Roger ever submitting pet registration paperwork. No approval letters, no acknowledgement that he even owned an animal. According to the very rules Roger was using to threaten Anna, Princess's presence in the community was completely illegal. Armed with this evidence, Anna requested a formal hearing with the HOA board. Under the community's bylaws, any homeowner facing fines had the right to present their case before a decision became final. Roger tried to schedule the hearing for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, knowing Anna worked days at the pharmacy, but she insisted on her legal right to an evening meeting that wouldn't force her to choose between her job and her home. The hearing was held in the community center's cramped meeting room, with 5 board members seated behind a folding table, and Anna standing alone at the front with Buddy by her side. Roger had prepared a presentation complete with printed photos of Buddy in the yard, measurements of his height and weight, and quotes from the HOA covenants highlighted in yellow. He spoke for 20 minutes about property values, rule enforcement, and the dangerous precedent of allowing so-called service animals in a pet-free community. When Anna's turn came, her voice was steady despite the familiar tightness in her chest that accompanied confrontation. She began by reading Dr. Williams's letter aloud, explaining how Buddy's training helped her manage panic attacks, nightmares, and the hypervigilance that made simple activities like grocery shopping feel like combat missions. She showed the board her original approval letter from Prestige Community Services, dated and signed by the previous property manager. Then, with the methodical precision of someone who had once tracked medical supplies through war zones, she presented her evidence of Princess. The photographs were damning. Princess scratching Mrs. Lee's prize roses. Princess defecating in the children's sandbox at the playground. Princess climbing on cars and leaving paw prints on windshields. Princess sleeping on porch furniture that didn't belong to Roger. Most importantly, Anna had screenshots from the HOA's own database showing that no pet named Princess was registered to Roger's address or any other address in the community. The room fell silent as board members passed the evidence between them. Margaret Chen, the treasurer who had always deferred to Roger's judgment, studied the photos with growing concern. Kenneth Walsh, the secretary who lived 2 streets over from Roger, nodded slowly as he recognized his own car in one of the damaged photos. Even Patricia Dubois, Roger's longtime ally and the board's vice president, couldn't deny the clear double standard the evidence revealed. But what Margaret Thompson had discovered about Margaret's past explained her cruelty that went beyond simple rule enforcement. Roger's response revealed the depth of his hypocrisy. Rather than acknowledge Princess's violations, he attacked Anna's documentation methods, questioning whether she had the right to photograph other people's property, and accusing her of harassment. He claimed that cats were fundamentally different from dogs, requiring outdoor access for their mental health, while dogs should be kept indoors except for brief walks. When Margaret Chen pointed out that the HOA covenants made no distinction between cat and dog ownership, Roger's composure cracked. The mask slipped, and the real Roger emerged. He ranted about entitled young people who thought military service gave them the right to special treatment, about how accommodating one service animal would open the floodgates to every pet owner claiming their animal was therapeutic. His voice rose as he declared that he had been protecting the community's values long before Anna arrived, and he would continue doing so long after she was gone. The room's energy shifted as Roger's true motivations became clear. This wasn't about pet policies or property values. It was about control, and about a man who had lost authority in every other area of his life, clinging desperately to the power he still held over his neighbors. Dr. Patricia Williams attended the next board meeting as Anna's advocate, bringing with her a deeper understanding of both PTSD treatment and federal disability law. Dr. Williams had been treating veterans for 15 years, and she recognized the dangerous territory the HOA was entering by targeting a legitimately prescribed service animal. She explained to the board that Buddy wasn't just Anna's pet. He was a living, breathing medical device as essential to her treatment as insulin to a diabetic. The doctor's testimony revealed the full scope of Anna's struggle. The nightmares that left her afraid to sleep alone. The panic attacks triggered by sudden noises or crowds. The hypervigilance that made her check door locks multiple times each night. Buddy had been trained to interrupt nightmares by waking Anna gently, to perform room searches that helped calm her hypervigilance, and to provide deep pressure therapy during panic attacks. Without him, Anna's recovery could regress by months or years. But what I discovered about Roger's past explained his cruelty in ways that went beyond simple power hunger. Through conversations with longtime residents, Anna learned that Roger's crusade against her was deeply personal. His ex-wife had left him for a younger veteran, a Marine who had served 2 tours in Iraq. In Roger's twisted logic, Anna represented everything he resented about military service members: the respect they commanded, the benefits they received, and the sympathy extended to their struggles. By targeting her service dog, he was fighting a proxy war against every veteran who had received recognition he felt he deserved. Princess, meanwhile, continued her reign of terror throughout the community. Mrs. Lee's roses, which had taken 5 years to establish, were systematically destroyed as the cat used the raised beds as her personal bathroom. The Hendersons' koi pond became Princess's personal hunting ground, with 3 expensive fish falling victim to her predatory instincts. The Martinez family's vegetable garden was repeatedly damaged by the cat's nocturnal digging expeditions. Yet when these homeowners approached Roger about his pet's behavior, they were met with the same dismissive attitude Margaret Thompson had encountered. Roger would lecture them about natural animal behavior, suggest they install barriers around their property, or simply ignore their complaints entirely. The message was clear: his rules didn't apply to him. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Lee, despite her gentle nature, reached her breaking point. Her roses weren't just plants. They were living memorials to her late husband, Frank, who had helped her plant each bush during their 40-year marriage. Every morning, she would sit on her porch with her coffee and remember Frank's hands guiding hers as they pruned and fertilized together. Princess's destruction felt like a violation of sacred ground. Mrs. Lee began her own documentation campaign, photographing Princess's damage with the dedication of a crime scene investigator. But her evidence gathering went beyond simple property damage. She discovered that Princess had been entering other homes through pet doors, raiding food bowls, and marking territory inside neighbors' houses. The cat's behavior wasn't just destructive, it was creating genuine health and safety concerns for families with young children and elderly residents. When Mrs. Lee presented her evidence to the board, the scope of Roger's double standard became undeniable. While he threatened Anna with daily fines for Buddy's mere presence, his own pet was causing thousands of dollars in property damage throughout the community. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Anna's service dog, always leashed and under control, versus Roger's cat running wild and destroying neighbors' property with impunity. Kenneth Walsh, who had remained largely neutral throughout the controversy, experienced a personal awakening when he discovered Princess had been using his children's sandbox as a litter box. The health implications for his 3-year-old daughter were serious enough to require consultations with their pediatrician and replacement of all the sand. When Kenneth approached Roger about containing his pet, the HOA president's response was to suggest that parents who didn't want cats in their yards should keep their children indoors. The letter that arrived on Emma's birthday changed everything. But in Anna's case, it was the letter that arrived on the anniversary of her worst day in Afghanistan that crystallized her resolve to fight. October 15th marked 3 years since the IED explosion that killed 2 of Anna's closest friends and left her with a traumatic brain injury that triggered her PTSD. Every year this date brought a resurgence of symptoms, nightmares, panic attacks, and a crushing sense of survivor's guilt that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained stability. Buddy's presence was crucial during these anniversary reactions, providing the grounding and comfort that allowed Anna to process her grief without spiraling into complete breakdown. Roger's timing was either calculated cruelty or cosmic irony. The final demand letter, threatening immediate legal action and daily fines of $200, arrived on October 15th while Anna was already struggling with her most difficult day of the year. As she read Roger's ultimatum, remove Buddy within 24 hours or face eviction proceedings, the familiar sensation of drowning in her own mind began to overwhelm her. But instead of the panic that usually accompanied her anniversary reaction, Anna felt something different. Anger. Clean, focused, righteous anger at a man who would weaponize her trauma for his own petty satisfaction. Buddy sensed the change in her emotional state and pressed against her legs, but this time Anna didn't need the grounding. For the first time since her injury, her anger was serving her instead of controlling her. Anna's research into HOA law revealed that Roger had overstepped his authority in multiple ways. His threats of eviction were legally meaningless. Only a court could force the sale of her home. And no court would uphold an eviction based on discriminatory enforcement of pet policies. His escalating fine structure violated the community's own bylaws, which specified a maximum penalty of $50 per violation. Most importantly, his refusal to acknowledge federal disability law put the entire HOA at risk of costly civil rights litigation. But what Margaret did next crossed every line of human decency and revealed the depths of her desperation to maintain control over a situation that was slipping away from her grasp. Instead of acknowledging his mistakes, Roger doubled down with a strategy that bordered on harassment. He began patrolling the neighborhood at all hours, photographing Anna and Buddy during their therapeutic walks. He positioned himself in his yard during her typical exercise times, making pointed comments about fake service animals and government handouts, loud enough for her to hear. He circulated a petition among homeowners, claiming that Anna's emotional support pet was the first step toward the community becoming overrun with untrained animals. The psychological pressure was designed to trigger Anna's PTSD symptoms and force her to leave voluntarily. Roger had researched her condition enough to know that combat veterans often struggled with confrontation and authority conflicts. He believed that sustained harassment would cause her to crack under pressure, making his problem disappear without requiring him to acknowledge his double standards. But Roger had miscalculated. The Army medic who had treated wounded soldiers under enemy fire was stronger than the traumatized veteran he thought he was targeting. Anna's military training had taught her to function under pressure, to think clearly when others were panicking, and to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Every photograph Roger took, every snide comment he made, every attempt to intimidate her only strengthened her resolve to fight back. The community began to polarize as word of the conflict spread. Roger's longtime supporters, mostly older residents who valued strict rule enforcement, initially backed his position without examining the evidence. They trusted his leadership and believed his version of events, a troublemaking newcomer, was trying to circumvent established rules and undermine property values. But Anna's growing alliance of neighbors had seen the evidence firsthand. Mrs. Lee's destroyed roses, the Hendersons' dead fish, the Martinez family's damaged vegetables, Kenneth Walsh's contaminated sandbox. Roger's supporters found it increasingly difficult to justify his selective enforcement when presented with photographic evidence of Princess's unchecked destruction. Margaret Chen, the board treasurer who had served alongside Roger for 3 years, experienced a crisis of conscience that would ultimately determine the conflict's outcome. Margaret had always prided herself on fairness and integrity, values that were being tested by Roger's increasingly desperate behavior. When she discovered that Roger had been intercepting and hiding complaints about Princess, filing them away without bringing them to the board's attention, her loyalty shifted permanently. The evidence Margaret uncovered was damning. Roger had received over 30 written complaints about Princess in the past 18 months, ranging from property damage to health concerns to aggressive behavior toward children. He had responded to none of them, instead filing the complaints in a folder labeled nuisance issues that he had never shared with other board members. Meanwhile, he had created a detailed file on Anna and Buddy, documenting every sighting, and building a case for removal based on violations that existed only in his imagination. Dr. Williams' involvement brought a level of professional credibility that Roger couldn't dismiss or discredit. As a licensed psychologist with expertise in PTSD treatment, she provided expert testimony that educated the board about the realities of service animal therapy. Her explanation of how Buddy's training specifically addressed Anna's symptoms made it impossible for reasonable people to view the dog as merely a pet. The doctor also brought legal expertise that revealed the serious liability the HOA faced if they continued targeting Anna's service animal. Federal disability law provided powerful protections for service animal owners, with violations potentially resulting in civil rights lawsuits and Department of Justice intervention. Dr. Williams had consulted with disability rights attorneys who confirmed that Anna's case represented textbook discrimination based on disability status. But what happened during the final board meeting would become neighborhood legend, a story passed down through family barbecues and community gatherings for years to come. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening in November, with the community center packed to capacity for the first time in its history. Anna sat in the front row with Buddy at her feet, Dr. Williams beside her, and a folder thick with evidence on her lap. Roger occupied his usual position at the board table, but his confidence had been replaced by the defensive posture of someone fighting a losing battle. Mrs. Lee had requested permission to address the board, and her testimony was the evening's turning point. Speaking in her soft voice that forced the room to lean forward and listen, she described watching Princess destroy the roses Frank had helped her plant, the memorial garden that provided her only connection to her late husband. Tears ran down her face as she explained how Anna and Buddy had become her emotional support during this violation, with Anna offering to replant the roses, and Buddy providing gentle comfort during her grief. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Anna's properly registered service dog, always controlled and providing therapeutic benefit, versus Roger's unregistered cat causing documented destruction and distress throughout the community. Mrs. Lee's testimony crystallized what everyone in the room already knew. This conflict was never about pet policies or property values. It was about a man drunk on power targeting a vulnerable neighbor, while ignoring his own violations. Kenneth Walsh's presentation of health department concerns about Princess using children's play areas as a litter box brought a new dimension to the conflict. Parents throughout the community had been dealing with contaminated sandboxes, playground equipment marked with cat spray, and the health risks associated with children being exposed to feline waste. The irony was unavoidable. Roger was threatening to remove a trained service dog while his own pet created genuine health hazards for families. When Roger rose to defend his position, the room witnessed a complete breakdown of professional demeanor. Faced with undeniable evidence of his hypocrisy, he abandoned any pretense of rule enforcement and revealed the personal animosity driving his crusade. He ranted about entitled veterans expecting special treatment, about immigrants like Anna taking jobs from real Americans, about bleeding-heart liberals destroying traditional communities. The racist undertones of Roger's rant shocked board members who thought they knew him. Anna's surname and appearance had apparently been factors in his targeting, adding discriminatory motivation to his already illegal harassment campaign. Margaret Chen, herself an Asian American homeowner, listened with growing horror as Roger revealed prejudices she had never suspected during their years of working together. But the coup de grace came when Dr. Williams presented evidence that Roger had been researching Anna's military service and PTSD diagnosis. Using his position as HOA president, he had accessed her registration paperwork and contacted the property management company for personal information about her medical condition. His harassment campaign wasn't random. It was specifically designed to trigger her trauma responses and force her to leave the community. The legal implications were staggering. Roger had violated federal privacy laws, engaged in disability discrimination, and used his official position to harass a protected individual. The HOA's insurance company, when consulted about potential liability, recommended immediate settlement discussions to avoid costly federal litigation. The Department of Housing and Urban Development had already begun investigating complaints about discriminatory practices in the community. Margaret Chen's motion to remove Roger from his position as president passed unanimously among the remaining board members. Her follow-up motion to formally apologize to Anna and reverse all penalties also passed without dissent. The board voted to amend the community's pet policies to comply with federal disability law and establish clear procedures for service animal registration that prevented future discrimination. But the personal consequences for Roger extended far beyond his HOA position. Word of his behavior had reached his employer, where HR investigated complaints about his discriminatory attitudes toward veteran employees. His public meltdown during the board meeting, recorded by multiple neighbors, had gone viral on social media platforms, making him a symbol of HOA overreach and disability discrimination. Princess, the catalyst for the entire controversy, found herself subject to the same rules Roger had tried to enforce against Buddy. The board issued Roger a formal violation notice requiring him to register his pet, contain her activities to his own property, and pay restitution for documented property damage. The daily fines he had threatened against Anna became his own burden as Princess continued her destructive behavior while he struggled to modify years of ingrained habits. Anna's victory represented more than personal vindication. It was a transformation that affected her relationship with her own trauma. Standing up to Roger's bullying had required her to access reserves of strength she had forgotten she possessed. The skills that had made her an effective combat medic: quick thinking under pressure, advocacy for vulnerable patients, determination in the face of authority figures who prioritized rules over human welfare, had served her well in civilian battle. The support she received from neighbors like Mrs. Lee and Dr. Williams had rebuilt her faith in community connection. Combat had taught her that survival depended on teamwork and mutual protection, lessons that proved equally valuable in suburban warfare. The isolation and hypervigilance that characterized her PTSD began to ease as she developed genuine relationships with people who saw her as a person rather than a set of symptoms. Buddy's role in the victory went beyond his official status as a service animal. His calm presence during confrontations had modeled the emotional regulation Anna was working to achieve. His acceptance by neighbors who initially viewed him with suspicion had demonstrated that understanding could overcome prejudice when people took time to look beyond surface appearances. His perfect behavior throughout the crisis had proved that service animals, properly trained and managed, enhanced rather than diminished community life. The legal settlement the HOA reached with Anna included financial compensation for the harassment she had endured. But more importantly, It established precedents that would protect future residents with disabilities. The community's revised policies became a model for other HOAs struggling to balance community standards with federal accommodation requirements. Anna's case was cited in disability rights training seminars, helping property managers understand both the legal obligations and human dignity issues involved in service animal disputes. Roger's isolation within the community became complete as neighbors who had once respected his authority recognized the small-minded bigotry that had driven his actions. Property values, the concern he had claimed to champion, actually increased as the community gained a reputation for inclusive policies that welcomed military veterans and residents with disabilities. Real estate agents began marketing Willowbrook Gardens as a veteran-friendly community, attracting buyers who valued diversity and mutual support over rigid conformity. The anniversary dates that had once triggered Anna's worst PTSD symptoms became occasions for reflection on her growth and resilience. October 15th, previously marked by crushing grief and survivor's guilt, evolved into a day when she honored fallen friends by demonstrating the strength and determination they had died defending. The transformation wasn't complete. Trauma recovery is measured in years, not months. But Anna had reclaimed agency over her narrative. Mrs. Lee's rose garden, replanted with Anna's help and Buddy's companionship, bloomed more beautifully than ever the following spring. The shared project had created a bond between the two women that transcended their age difference and different life experiences. Mrs. Lee had taught Anna about patience and nurturing growth, while Anna had shown her that strength could coexist with vulnerability. Their friendship became a symbol of the community healing that was possible when people chose connection over conflict. The children in the neighborhood, initially wary of Buddy's size and official vest, learned to see past his working status to the gentle nature beneath. Their parents, educated about PTSD and service animals through the controversy, used the experience to teach lessons about differences, accommodation, and the invisible wounds carried by many veterans. Anna became a familiar and welcome presence at community events, with Buddy serving as an ambassador for both service animals and the veterans who depended on them. Kenneth Walsh's transformation from neutral observer to active ally illustrated how personal experience could change perspectives on disability issues. His daughter's potential exposure to health hazards from Princess had made abstract policy discussions suddenly personal and urgent. His advocacy for clear, fair enforcement of community rules helped establish the transparent processes that prevented future discrimination while maintaining legitimate community standards. Dr. Williams's involvement had extended far beyond Anna's individual case, as she worked with the HOA to develop educational materials about PTSD, service animals, and disability accommodation. Her workshops for board members and property managers throughout the region used Anna's experience as a case study in both what could go wrong and how communities could do better. The doctor's advocacy helped dozens of other veterans navigate similar conflicts with greater support and understanding. The media attention Anna's case received brought national focus to the issues facing disabled veterans in civilian communities. Her story was featured in veterans publications, disability rights newsletters, and property management industry publications as an example of both the challenges and solutions involved in accommodation disputes. The coverage helped other veterans understand their rights while educating HOA boards about their legal obligations and the human impact of discriminatory policies. Anna's professional life also benefited from the confidence and advocacy skills she had developed during the conflict. Her supervisors at the VA pharmacy recognized her leadership potential and began involving her in patient advocacy initiatives. Her ability to navigate complex regulations while maintaining focus on human needs made her a valuable liaison between medical staff and veteran patients struggling with bureaucratic obstacles. The financial settlement from the HOA allowed Anna to make improvements to her home that enhanced both her comfort and Buddy's effectiveness as a service animal. A fenced backyard provided secure exercise space, while home modifications created quiet areas where Buddy could perform his therapeutic functions without disruption. The house that had begun as a symbol of stability became a genuine sanctuary where Anna could continue her healing journey. 3 years after Roger knocked on her door with his ultimatum, Anna Martinez stood in her backyard watching Buddy play with Mrs. Lee's grandchildren while their parents prepared for a neighborhood barbecue. The community that had once seemed hostile had become genuinely welcoming, not through any magical transformation, but through the hard work of people choosing to build bridges rather than walls. The HOA board now included 3 veterans and a disability rights advocate, reflecting the community's evolution toward inclusive leadership. Property values had indeed increased, as Roger had always claimed to desire, but for reasons he had never imagined. Prospective buyers were attracted to a community known for standing up to bullying and supporting vulnerable residents. Roger himself had eventually moved away, selling his house at a loss after his reputation made continued residents uncomfortable. Princess had been rehomed with his sister in another state, where her outdoor activities were less destructive to neighborhood relationships. The house that had been a symbol of rigid authority became home to a young family with 2 children and a rescue dog, bringing the joy and vitality that had been missing under Roger's suspicious watch. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Anna herself. The woman who had once checked her locks multiple times each night now slept peacefully, trusting in the security she had built through community connections rather than barriers. The veteran who had struggled with authority conflicts had learned to advocate effectively without losing her essential humanity. The trauma survivor who had hidden her struggles had become a resource for other veterans navigating similar challenges. This story will change how you look at every HOA letter in your mailbox, but more importantly, it should change how you think about the neighbors around you. Behind every conflict over rules and regulations are real people with real struggles, trying to build lives of dignity and purpose in communities that should nurture rather than punish their efforts to belong. Anna Martinez thought her biggest worry was adjusting to civilian life after military service. Instead, she discovered that her greatest strength lay not in following orders, but in standing up for what was right when those in authority lost their way. Her therapy dog Buddy had been trained to help her navigate trauma, but he also became her partner in building the kind of community where healing is possible and differences are celebrated rather than feared. The knock on the door that had seemed like a threat to everything Anna had worked to build became the catalyst for a transformation that benefited everyone involved. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it with courage, integrity, and the support of people who choose to stand together rather than apart. Before you dismiss your next difficult neighbor or assume that someone fighting HOA rules is just being difficult, remember Anna's story. Behind the conflict might be someone fighting not just for their rights, but for their very ability to heal, to belong, and to build the life they've earned through service and sacrifice. The choice to support or undermine that effort says far more about our communities than any set of rules ever could.